Hey guys, it's Lion here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing another manga review. We're going to be looking at Adam the Beginning, arc number 4. That's chapters 12 through 18. And as I've mentioned before, it's written by Masami Yuki with Tetsuro Kasahara as the artist. Published by Panini. The demographic is adult/seinen, whatever you want to call it. The genre is science fiction and action. And the adaptation does not actually cover this part of the story. So yeah, in terms of ratings, a 4.5 out of 5. Like, there's good stuff here, but this is probably one of the arcs that I read before that I really liked initially, but now reading it again, I don't like as much. I mean, really, what's the difference between a 4.5 out of 5 and a 5 out of 5? Not much, honestly, but it's a little bit less enjoyable. And that basically means that there was a chapter or two where I wasn't really, like, you know, chomping at the bit to continue reading, right? Like, there was times where I was distracted easier than usual from reading it, right? So that's basically what kind of encompasses that. And the premise for this arc is that the boys are asked to meet with Dr. Saruda, and Dr. Saruda is their advisor, and basically the only person that thinks that they can succeed. But as they're going to meet him, they are attacked, and so they have to flee to safety. And they do this in a very action movie style kind of way by being helped by Sarata's daughter, right? So that's kind of the basic idea there. And it's really, really fun, but there's moments where I'm not super interested. And I think that that's because this is my second time reading it, which I mentioned before, but I think it's important to re-stress because I'm going to mostly talk about this like I'm enjoying it. So you might not really notice the difference, right? So yeah, in terms of plot line here, basically starts with this idea that peace is desired by all humans. Although you can extend it to all living things, depending on how you want to translate it, honestly. But we'll go with all humans. And this is kind of an idea that basically they kind of mention as a way to kind of start, like, to juxtapose it with the crazy violence that happens in the later parts of this volume, but also to kind of highlight the ending quite powerfully, right? So I think it's important that you pay attention to this stuff, right? So yeah, then we move on to something else. The professors of the university all come by to inspect the lab, and it doesn't really go well. They don't really find the lab to be in condition because it's next to a scrapyard. They find the lab to be dirty and unwieldy and, you know, annoying. And they also don't find what Hiroshi and Tenma are doing to be valuable. And this is because Tenma and Hiroshi are bad at selling their stuff, right? They're in a very classic kind of example of an engineer. They're very invested in the ideas and kind of talk about them in a pretty high level way, right? And Hiroshi and Tenma aren't really proper, like, real engineers are not necessarily the way Hiroshi and Tenma are, right? But there's certain behaviors that are pretty similar. And I say that because Hiroshi and Tenma are very ideological. And it's a very, like, movie trope kind of thing, right? Like, I don't think most engineers are really all that ideologically interested. They're usually more interested in what they're doing than why they're doing it or what the possible ramifications of it are beyond, you know, how expensive it might be, right? I mean, I had a professor like last year, I think, who was basically like, yeah, engineers are not about making the world better. They're about making money. And well, that's not really a great kind of idea, but it is. I think it's probably a more prevalent version of the attitude. And well, Hiroshi and Tenma are very bad at making that sort of argument. They're very ideological. They want to create a friend for humanity, another intelligence that is not them. And they also want to create a god figure, right? Something that is greater than human. And we know this from previous arcs. You know, this is their, you know, Hiroshi is very interested in the creating a companion for humanity, whereas Tenma is creating something better than humanity. And when they try to explain this to the professors don't care. They're just like, what the hell's wrong with you? Stop. We're going to shut this down, right? And this is when Saruda steps in and is like, no one's going to close anything down. we're leaving now. Let's get the hell out of here, right? And then he tells the boys, meet me at 4 at my lab. And this is because he saw the bolt head that they took from the Mysterious Island arc in the previous review, right? So I don't think I mentioned it back then, but yeah, they took the head of the bolt that attacked A104, and they took it with them. And well, this is important because later on it affects how Adam reacts, right? So yeah, then we see some time pass. The boys decide to leave the lab, and it's 4 p.m. They're going out, so they take Adam with them after they fix his arm, and then they head out when a car stops them, right? In a very kind of like action scene type of way. And it turns out that this car is full of goons, and these goons attack them. They shoot at them. And Adam manages to stop them, right? Then a woman shows up in a van, and she's like, get in if you guys want to live, right? Very ridiculous kind of fun stuff. And turns out that this woman is Saruta's daughter. Saruta being their lab head. And there's a cool car chase here, right? Initially, within the car chase, there's a long philosophical discussion about the difference between AI intelligence, right? And the difference between different AIs and their, what's it called, like standing within like actual consciousness, if that makes sense. And they bring up this idea of the philosophical zombie, right? Which is a thing that simulates conversation, but is not actually able to exist as an individual. It just gives you the illusion of that, right? And this is interesting stuff, but within the context of what's happening, it's not necessarily the right time to have it. And so there's this weird pacing issue where you feel like something really fast is happening, and then at the same time you're having this like slow, methodical like conversation. And so it's really odd, right? And that's one of the things that always bothered me about this part of the story. Like, both parts of the story are interesting. I just don't think that they should be happening at the same time, if that makes sense, right? So we have this conversation about the philosophical zombie. And this is a real thing, actually. It's like a philosophical stand, right? Or like stance. And I guess it's actually kind of important nowadays with the way that AI works now. But, it really depends, right? It basically just describes a large language model compared to like an actual thoughtful conversation, right? Like, that's basically the idea. So good stuff there. Outside of that conversation, bolts are chasing them down. And we learn that these guys are called bolts at this point because Adam is able to recognize them as such. And while this is happening, Ran runs into Moria in his chair, and then she asks him for help. So this comes back around later. The bolts are chasing them. Suki engages this joint control of this turret that's in her car, and she does this because she has a robot eye, and part of her brain is also robot because she had an accident as a child, and Dr. Sarada's work is around that, right? And so he saved his daughter. We learn this later on in the arc, but it's relevant now because it's like the most natural way of mentioning it. And so she joins with her AI thing in her van, controls this turret, and manages to take out some of the bolts. But some of them are still left, and so at this point, Adam steps in. He's like, I got this. I can do this, right? And he steps out of the car, and he starts fighting them. And something happens here where Adam is basically better at fighting now than he was before. And so they're not sure why that is, right? And this becomes an issue in a moment when they're free, when they're safe, right? When Adam manages to save them away. They get to the safe house, and then the boys discuss with Adam, how did you learn this stuff? Turns out Adam downloaded information from the bolt heads into himself. And so he downloaded their combat abilities and stuff like that. But this is ultimately a problem because he did it essentially on his own will. And this is not okay because he's still part of the robots that are supposed to act dependent on orders, right? And they thought that he did it completely by himself. It turns out that based on the first arc, Adam had been given permission to download data from other robots, and it was never resigned. So he was able to like force its priority at this moment, like earlier, when they weren't in combat, in order to build up his skills, right? And this is something that we know is important to Adam because in the previous arc, he gets hurt by not knowing about weapons, right? And so this is technically actually a free will kind of concept, but within the logic of the robot, it is technically not, right? But it is basically what we do, right? We're told to learn something, and then we can continuously learn things for the rest of our life if we want to, or we can decide not to do any of that and just ignore the idea of learning, right? So it's kind of the same concept. Like at that point, I don't really think that there's too much of a difference. He basically did it of his own free will, but not exactly, right? So like there's still this like order that was given to him at some point. So it makes sense, but this is important because it becomes relevant to later stuff, like down the line in arc 6, right? So yeah, overall, this was a really enjoyable kind of part of the story, and it actually starts getting even better now, right? Because Ran and Moria arrive to chat and to, see what's going on. I'm not really sure how they arrive here, actually. I think Dr. Saruda shows up. I think that's what happens. And he brings them along. And then Ivan drops in. And Ivan is this giant robot. Right there. He's from Russia. And he is the newest military robot that's been showcased. And so he and Adam have to fight. And this is a really powerful fight because of two things. One, Adam always has his communication channel open, especially when he sees other great robots, right? And so he's receiving information. And at this point, it looks like Ivan is trying to talk to him, right? But Ivan is talking to him kind of like a child, right? Like what would you expect a brute to talk like, right? And initially, this kind of makes sense to us, right? Like Ivan is a intelligent being, but not at the same level as Mars and Adam, right? Then, while Adam is trying to respond to him and never gets a response back, like there's no dialogue. This is just like Ivan sends out signals and Adam receives them, and any of the ones that Adam sends back do not arrive, right? And he never gets a response to them. So Adam is really confused, and this actually makes him hesitate a lot. And so basically it seems like Adam is not really fighting properly, and no one understands why until eventually Mars arrives. And Mars tells Adam, dude, you're freaking stupid. Stop and pay attention to what he's saying. And remember what you told me, right? And basically this is that the Heracles company, which is who Dr. Lolo works for, essentially, saw that there was a moment where Adam forced Mars to stop through a sending of signals. So they thought that it was a hacking like transmission, like a Trojan horse type of transmission, where it sends out something and then it makes the robot hesitate by introducing a virus, right? That's technically not what it does, but it does work like that on Adam because he thinks that he's trying to be communicated with, right? And then Adam actually gets angry at this. He's like, you use my own words against me. I thought you were trying to communicate with me and you aren't. And then he just destroys Ivan, like really crazy. Like it's very powerful, right? And then Ivan, it turns out, actually did have some level of thought. It was just pretty low. And we see Adam kind of have remorse at the fact that he defeated Ivan so badly, and then Mars kills Ivan to like remove technological data and information from the world, so that no one can find the pieces later and then, you know, do corporate espionage, right? And so Adam is actually angry at Mars. He's like, why did you kill him? He was already defeated, right? And, well, it's pretty sad because Ivan is looking at the moon, talking about he's going to go there one day, because that's kind of like what he was designed for. But then he dies. So it's pretty sad, kind of end of this arc here. And then finally the next day, Saruta shows up to the lab. And then he's like, everything we've seen so far, everything you guys have done with the bolts and with Ivan and with those goons, forget all of it. And Adam talks to Dr. Saruta. He's like, what is Project T? We don't know what that is. But he also tells Adam to forget about that. He's like, don't even mention that. Stop. And it probably has to do with the Great Catastrophe, right? Because that's where they got that information from. But it's a pretty interesting arc. There's pacing issues, which is probably the biggest issue. And that's actually why I liked it less than before through this read-through. Otherwise, it's pretty great. In terms of characters, we get introduced to Suki. We get Surata to do something in this arc-ish, sort of. We get Ivan, who is a pretty cool robot. Apparently, there's a Russian story that inspired Osama Tezuka. And then Osama Tezuka made this robot Ivan, who was in the original, Astro Boy stuff. And he was on the moon. And this is where this robot is inspired from. So that's cool. And then Adam has anger and self-motivation. So there's growth there. A little bit of world building. I mean, there's this mystery. These mystery bad guys, right? We don't know what they're supposed to be from. Or there's this international crime agency. Basically, it's like Interpol, right? But not exactly. Or also, it's also called the International Crime Investigators, right? So, ICI. Although in Spanish, they call it ICE. ICE. Which is international crime. How does it work? Investigators of Crime International or something like that. Like the order of the words is backwards, but basically it's International Crime Investigators. And Sarada's daughter works for them. And that's why she has all of these crazy, interesting tools that, average Japanese people should not have. And then we have that Ivan and Mars connection because they're both from Project Heracles, or they're both from Heracles Corporation, right? So that's cool. In terms of artwork and fan service, the artwork is amazing. Again, really, really good stuff. It's really awesome. And there's really no fan service, but the Suki the Suki character is a female character, and she's really pretty. I really like the way that they drew her. A lot, and so do so does Hiroshi. He talks about her nose and how beautiful it is. And it's really funny because Hiroshi has really weird noses, right? Or like most of the characters in the series have really weird noses. So that's pretty fun. Ratings wise, a 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Like I said, really good stuff. The back half is really awesome, but these philosophical kind of conversations that happen throughout really kill the pacing a bit, so it's kind of hard to read sometimes, but overall good stuff, right? So there you go. Those are my reviews. That's my review, my thoughts for Adam the Beginning arc number 4. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought down below. Thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.